Why, hello there, dear listener. I'm your host, Derwin Blackthorn, and this is the Dirty Lore House podcast, coming at you with all the deliciously nutty dirty lore. Usually around November, we have a bunch of wonderful games to buy and appreciate, just in time for Christmas. You're in your little red long johns with the butt flap broken from Uncle Paul roughhousing too much during family visits. Your feet pitter-patter down the stairs for a pleasant view of the Christmas tree. All those boxes and bows gleaming with glitter. Unwrapping a game to physically put it in the console was both a chore, but a beautiful feeling. There was anticipation as you prayed the Nintendo 64 was going to work, with the fun of blowing to the cartridge. And boy did we have fun games back then. I wasn't quite there for the 64, and I didn't get to play anything Nintendo outside of the Game Boy Advance and the 3DS, but I knew about Sonic early on. The franchise is so big because Sega was, at one time, a console distributor, with the Sega Genesis. But after a few failures like the Dreamcast, Saturn, and 32X, if anybody remembers that one, it developed into being simply a third-party game publisher. It's not like they made bad games, but when it comes to Sonic games after this horrible failure, they made bad Sonic games. Sonic 06 was deemed one of the worst Sonic games out there. But it's only that way from how broken the controls were, with the rest of the game being on par with how cringeworthy the series became once it entered the 3D era. During the Pixel era, Sonic was amazing. One of my favorite games is Sonic Battle because you're able to fight as Sonic characters with your friends, and you get to customize a fighting robot that takes cards from every other character, to where you try to unlock all the cards to hold his ultimate form. Also, Emerald, the robot, looks awesome with his golden armor and that horn thing on his head. Other games like Sonic 1, 2, and that one with Knuckles were also good, albeit simple as a process. You run from left to right to try to avoid the obstacles in the way. It's all spectacle and simple to play, but it's something that kids and autistic people can enjoy for a long time. Once I mention autistic people, I have to mention why Sonic continues to be noteworthy, despite being one of the worst games to come out now. No doubt about it, Sonic games will always sell. As I mentioned before, Sonic 06 was bad, but it was still sold well and sold even more copies later on, because Sonic games constantly had revivals. If someone says, "This game sucks," then some autistic hipster 5 years later will make a video about it to revive that particular game, usually for a college project. I have not played anything since Sonic Adventures 2, and even then I played it way after the fact that it was a meme with songs like City Escape. I will have to admit that even though Sonic games suck ass now, their music still retains that catchy beat we all know and love. But the reason autistic people are so focused on Sonic mostly comes from the fact that it's not Mario, and it was trying to be the main competitor of Mario. The autistic mind is usually aware that it is different from other people, which is why so many hipsters relate to the autistic person. They are both attracted to the odd one out, the otherness of something that doesn't belong, finding a place in it because they feel like that other thing that is odd and doesn't belong. They are a minority that usually needs to be taken care of by a normal person. The left tries to cater to this type of minority that isn't able to take care of itself, and it's no wonder someone like Chris Chan became, well, whatever that creature is now. The Sonic fan has become an online symbol for this dysfunctional autistic person, due to how aggressively autistic they are online. For anyone who needs the game explained to them like they're a normal person, the Sonic franchise is essentially about a blue anthropomorphic hedgehog that runs really fast and has a bunch of animal friends who aid him in defending the world from a technological takeover that is turning biomatter into robots, with the person behind this takeover being Dr. Robotnik. In a way, Sonic began as an environmentalist argument that could be compared to movies like George of the Jungle and Fern Gully, which was common to see in the 90s, due to how the rainforests were being attacked and corporations decided to cover up their own destructive habits by making media about this issue. In a way, the environmentalism of this time would relate to our current era of survivalist media like Walking Dead and the 100, with zombies also relating heavily to environmentalist arguments, which can also be called something like bioconservative when involving the cyberpunk aesthetic, which Sonic would do as well. A lot of background into why Sonic was created is important to understand for what I'm about to tell you. In the recent release of Sonic X Shadow Generations, there was a strange form of censorship that occurred at a request of nobody. In the opening of what we know so far, we see Sonic pushing Amy away with his hand as she's talking, which was demanded as microaggressions in the US, but was also considered acceptable in Japan and 5 minutes ago. They censored it out with Sonic holding out birthday cake or cupcakes or something. And the same thing that the 4Kids did to Pokemon in the 90s, where they would be eating rice balls and they're like, wow, these are great. These are great Eggo waffles. They didn't really want kids to know about rice balls because they're Asian. They feared the American child brain would explode at the thought that rice could be used as a snack, even though they eat Rice Krispie treats. Yeah, it's that stupid. But here, instead of, you're not allowed to look Asian, they changed it to, you're not allowed to put your hand up to a woman's face, even though that woman is a talking pink animal. Sega believed that this was oppressive and offensive towards females everywhere, and that it would harm children if they saw that, and that's why they kept the scene where Amy puts her hand to Knuckles' face like 5 seconds later. So remember, a woman can do this to a man, but a man can't do it to a woman. And this is how we get gender equality. Makes sense to me, what's your problem? The other form of censorship was where Rouge the Bat had a massive downgrade in her appearance, where everything is covered and her breast had her cleavage removed. With Square Enix in Dragon Quest III Remake, they didn't remove her cleavage, they just covered it up, and that was with a human character. Here is a talking bat that has bat tits, and we're not allowed to see her cleavage or her back, up to her neck, because this will harm children somehow. But then these are the same people who take their kids to a pride parade where there are naked men dressed up as BDSM dogs, and there are drag queens presenting a sideshow parody of a woman with as much cleavage and ass showing as possible. Again, this looks contradictory when you approach it logically, but that's why we have to understand it from the feminist film theory point of view. And we also need to realize why Sega would do such silly tricks. They censor it in the US, but not in Japan. Why? Japan is fine with a sexy Batwoman because the joke is that the Bat would be sexy. This has been a joke in cartoons since the 50s and prior, with characters like Toodles Galore from Tom and Jerry being treated as a sex symbol of their time. I think she was based on Lana Turner or someone like that. You have no idea who Lana Turner is, do you? She was a blonde lady with a nice face and long legs. You know, beautiful gams. She was that broad in The Postman Always Rings Twice, so I guess Alfred Hitchcock fans would know about her. The point is that we think it's funny for a random cat character to look like a celebrity, to give the impression that they are attractive, so that the audience can understand why the characters in the story will find her attractive. I'm trying to explain why they gave tits to Rouge the Bat and Lola Bunny in Space Jam. Then there's Nala from Lion King when she gives Simba the fuck me eyes. Right when Nala did that while she's on her back, her paws curled all vulnerable, everyone was like, there's gonna be a Simba Jr. tonight. We understand these sexy animals were a joke for a long time, until the internet came out and we gained Rule 34. If it's drawn, there's gonna be porn of it, and boy howdy is there porn of Rouge the Bat. I don't think you need to look into it to know that there's a lot of porn of it. The website Newgrounds was basically created by people making Sonic hentai, and then adding something silly here and there. The characters are easy to draw, the art style is very rounded and like an anime, so when people practice drawing these characters as horny teens, they're inclined to make porn of them. Then when you add autistic people who are obsessed with furry porn on top of that, you get a giant ecosystem designed around the character being slutty and sexy. The idea that the company would remove her sexuality or cover something like her back will make them freak out. In the same way Chris Chan freaked out over Sonic's arms being turned blue. It's not really like they need porn in the game to make porn about it outside of the game. The fans are sensitive to any slight changes to a character design because it's a form they were used to and now it's different. And these people don't want to see something they're obsessed about change. A big thing that makes autistic people attracted to the gameplay of Sonic is the fact that you have to repeat levels in order to unlock more ways to play the same level. The reason why Sonic games do this is because each track is a long and massive area of interaction that you're meant to zoom on by. With 2D sprites, you could easily copy and paste simple assets to a map and establish everything rather quickly. With 3D, you need to figure out the camera for the loops, going back, going forward, going left, going right, making little platforms where enemies attack, making little circles for the boss battle, but it turns out to be a square, and it's like that annoying level with Chaos and Sonic Adventure 2. Once the game went 3D, it introduced a million problems that are still unable to fix, mostly involving the camera and the fact that they can't make that many levels. The very existence of Sonic X Shadow Generations is proof that they're trapped in simply remaking older levels and just enhancing the graphics every few years. The entire series is kept alive by autistic people who would buy the next installment no matter how bad it is. And yet the censorship we see in the new game is something that is going to make them want to stop supporting the company. They don't care if the game is broken because they're not able to comprehend that it's broken as a game. They just want their little animal friends to hang out at a birthday party and act like every generic kid show with hyper-kindness and quirky banter meant for a cartoon. The very fact that these people read these horrible Archie comics is proof that they aren't interested in proper storytelling or something that makes sense. They just want the characters to look the same and act the same in a never-ending cycle of relating to a childlike mind. Same goes for Pokemon, same goes for Digimon, Mega Man, My Little Pony, what else is there? Yu-Gi-Oh!, Power Rangers, Kamen Rider, Gundam, Teletubbies, Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Solid, Neon Genesis Evangelion, SpongeBob, Adventure Time, Rick and Morty, Evader Zim. I'm sure I'm targeting everyone's favorite show or game here, and this isn't trying to say anyone who likes these things is autistic. What I'm trying to say is that these things rely on the autistic part of the fandom as an insured financial cushion, where they will not leave and they will keep on buying the products as long as it stays the same. Normal people will like these things as a nostalgic part of their childhood, but the autistic person never leaves their childhood, or at least has a hard time dropping their childlike habits to act more like an adult. In a way, Sonic will always be well written in order to cause people to engage in it, to begin with. But the idea of censoring outfits and actions in order to appeal to a subset of the autistic community is going to damage Sega in the following future. When you demonize the idea of Rouge's sexuality, the hipster and the autistic fan will retaliate, and these people have more free time than you can even imagine. Chris Chan actually had a Facebook group called Fix Sonic's Arms Immediately, Sega! And this group technically did get the arms to change back. In Sonic Prime, his arms are back to being flesh-colored, but in the US movie, the arms are still blue. Something is going on with this constant switch, and it becomes noteworthy for people like Chris Chan and other Sonic fans like him. And I'm not saying every Sonic fan is going to do something zany like Chris Chan did when he took advantage of his mother's catatonic state. What I'm saying is that there is a large group of people who don't like these constant changes and these weird decisions behind Sonic. But they'll buy the product anyway, confusing the hell out of people making the movies, the shows, and the games. Remember when the movie came out and we saw that Sonic had little baby teeth? That was odd, but it wasn't a story or anything. People demanded a censorship of the teeth, even if him having teeth makes sense because he's meant to smile and stuff. How does he smile without teeth? How does he eat chili dogs without teeth? I guess he can give a mean gobby, but that's not part of the story. When Rouge is censored to appeal to the feminist form of 4Kids regulations, this is a problem for the fans. But when Sonic is given teeth out of nowhere, the fans demand censorship so strongly that the movie makes last-minute changes that I think cost millions of dollars to fix. Let me see. Yeah, right here, it says $35 million, which was like 1/4 of the whole budget. That's insane, and it appears contradictory, but only if you're saying the problem is exclusively censorship. The problem is not that Rouge was censored, but that Rouge was changed for a feminist agenda. The teeth being censored was done for an aesthetic. I don't know what you call it, comfort? Cartoony continuity? Something where we aren't thinking about the existence of Sonic having sharp and scary little teeth. Same as how cartoons will remove genitalia from anthropomorphic animals so that we don't have to see their junk when they take their clothes off. I mean, do we really want to see how Patrick's wiener looks like? Or whatever Mr. Krabs has under his shell? I don't even know if crabs have dicks. Those spider have puss. I don't know. I don't see the drama ending well. When I first saw the 4Kid stuff going on in Sonic X, I didn't care because I was a kid and I wasn't that much into Sonic as a franchise. I was just having fun with Sonic Battle on my Game Boy Advance, and I was more into really old Lego games, if anything, like Rock Raiders and Red Alert games. I was into Nickelodeon shows and rarely went on to Fox Kids or 4Kids. I am not speaking about this issue as someone who is passionate about Sega or Sonic. I am speaking about it as an outsider who is objectively observing the downfall of Sega that is going to occur if they keep on pretending that they can get away with woke censorship. And again, it's not just that it's censorship, but that it's done for a very stupid reason and that the fans never asked for. If the fans wanted the teeth removed, they should go ahead and remove them. But if some tourist or a weird predatory woke agency tells them to censor out the bare back of a bat, well, that's a tongue twister. But it's also a way to ignore the fans. We're not supposed to ignore the fans. We're supposed to do what the fans want because that's how an established company makes profit. To wrap this up, I want people to realize that the biggest companies out there are still vulnerable to collapsing, just how Sega was a console company, quickly reduced to a third-party game publisher. Yes, they make big games like Total War, Alien Isolation, Yakuza, Ace Combat, and Valkyria Chronicles, but this doesn't save them when people stop engaging with their biggest products. Companies in Japan are facing the biggest debt in their country right now, caused by the real estate bubble, their abundance of old people, and their lack of young people to foot the bill. For the past 30 years, Japan is in a time called the Lost Decades, where their economy stagnation is presenting something like an absence of an economy due to the inability to grow or shrink. I could never imagine being the typical salaryman of Japan who had to get good grades in school, just to be stuck in a life that doesn't shrink or grow, to then never have the hope of raising a child due to the rising costs and lack of financial growth. When I use Sega, autism, and the Japanese salaryman in the same sentence, I want you to picture them all as the same person. The symbol of something that's unable to grow, relies on other people to survive, and does things that harm itself in the long run as a way to stifle the pain in the short run, all while being unable to recognize that it's suffering the entire time. Sega, as well as any other Japanese gaming company, wants that pile of money called an ESG fund. They go for DEI regulations in order to access this free money. They see the pool of money as something that will keep the company alive through the upcoming collapse. But it will kill them off in the long run because people are less willing to buy their product when they implement these DEI regulations. What happens when a company spends money to produce a game, to then not make enough on the game, to then rely on handouts to make up for the costs? In some ways, they will gain infrastructure, which then increases their overhead and their debt. This works until the debt needs to be paid or there becomes a moment where the handouts stop coming. Where will they get this money then? I talk about this subject to both make fun of the absurdity that Sega would censor something so meaningless, but also to express that Sega is a multi-million-dollar company that needs to pay the bills in some way. Our current financial climate is not at all where the company makes the product, get the funding from the sales, to then determine if they are able to have enough money to make another one. These companies are designed where they get millions of dollars from investors, some from the government, most of it on multiple loans, to then engage in the stock market to where most of their developments are made through leverage, which is where they use debt to make infrastructure to increase their net worth, which increases how much debt they can hold. If they have $1 of infrastructure, they get a loan to pay 3% interest for another $1 or $2 to use. When this is in the millions, you're then able to hold millions while spending millions on production, which keeps on getting extended as long as they're making that tiny amount of growth. If they make profit above their interest rate, this becomes more infrastructure for them to double or triple their money. This is why a company like Sega could grow really fast, but it's also why they go horrifically bankrupt after only a few mistakes, which is why they are desperate for this ESG money. If any normal person out there was in charge of the millions of dollars of debt, they would chop off their own tongue just to save the body, which is why these companies had to act like wokeness is not a problem. They have to pretend that they are woke, which is why the woke online are angry at companies like Sega, or Disney, or WB, for not being woke enough. It's never enough for the online advocate because their demand is for women to be in charge, and for the trans black lesbian with polio to be worshipped as a Gnostic god of virtue. As autistic and cringe as a Sonic fan may be with things like furry porn and bat tits, the woke are even more dysfunctional by being bat tit insane. Yes, I waited that long to make that pun. No, I'm not sorry. I keep it real. But in all seriousness, I fear Sega will suffer the consequences of this tiny attempt to retaining company value. Sega is not even Sega these days. It's actually a subsidiary of a corporation called Sega Sammy Holding Incorporated, with their stock currently around $4.55, with their peak around $5.50. They have a yearly up and down, meaning whenever they come out with a large release, such as Sonic X Shadow Generations, they get a large rise in value, only to have it drop right after the release announcement. This is common for nearly every gaming company now because of how controversy and hype work for game releases. And this is not me saying that they're dying right now, but rather their stock is no different than a company like Square Enix, Capcom, EA Games, or Activision Blizzard. Every major company is suffering from the same woke problems because they're all relying on the same style of leverage that is now causing them to become desperate for extra funds, as they experience an increase of costs and reduction of sales. If this new Sonic game fails to make the initial autistic sales that every other game had, then they will suffer from the lack of sales, meaning they will see millions of dollars wiped out. Corporate debt is a serious thing, and we need to realize it's getting more serious as Japan is falling deeper into national debt as a country. And we also need to realize that the US is being as predatory as ever with this woke narrative, meaning Japan is doing all of these things against their will, in what seems to be the sad attempt at keeping the economy alive. The lost decades will be lost indeed once the global recession is fully initiated. Sadly, I think this initiation will start with Japan. Even though Japan is only having the economy as it has now because the US turned it into a production vassal. Sonic may be one of the stupidest furry-obsessed pieces of trash out there, but the absurdity that it would contribute to the inevitable downfall of Japan's economy is almost too sad to joke about. It's like if Popeye helped to cause the Great Depression. The irrational decision to cause media to become that powerful and popular, to where massive corporations like Sega and Sony are determined as essential, to where the US can abuse them, is why I'm all for the collapse. Let the system fall apart, have smart people to pick up the pieces, and make Japan great again. Till next time.